No, your eyes haven't gone all wonky. Clutched here in my mitts, I have a fresh new smartphone from HTC. Starting from 499 quid here in the UK, the HTC U23 Pro is a mid-range mobile taken on the Pixel 7a and Samsung's Galaxy A54. Very stiff competition indeed, but this HTC does boast some features that most rivals have killed off, like a headphone jack and expandable storage, plus some pretty awesome extras like wireless battery charging and a 108MP rear camera, all wrapped up in a water-resistant frame. Sounds pretty lush, but is it? Well, let's whip the HTC U23 Pro out of the box, give it a thorough going over, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So what have we got in that box? Well, there's an HTC U23 Pro, a USB cable, stabby SIM pin, and that's it. No adapter, no protective condom case. So now, let's check out the phone. So there's nothing particularly remarkable or standout about the HTC U23 Pro as far as the design goes. It's a bit of a big one at 6.7 inches, weighs a squirrel's scrotum over 200 grams. That's pretty much standard for 2023. You have decidedly chunky bezels surrounding that display as well, adding on a bit of girth, especially down below, quite a fat lip. And don't expect any premium materials here, it is a plastic frame and a placky back as well for the U23 Pro. This is the coffee black model, which actually reminds me I've only had the one pot so far this morning. Just stick another one on before I face plant the desk. And again, it's a smart but pretty straightforward design. Wee bit of HTC logo action. A rather sizable camera chassis that thankfully doesn't jut too far from that arse end. But hey, up top you also do have that elusive headphone jack, which is becoming increasingly rare in 2023. It may be a placky back, but you do at least have Gorilla Glass Victus protecting that display, so hopefully it won't crack if you drop it face down on concrete. Although it does tend to scratch up a wee bit, and there's no screen protector installed here on the U23 Pro, so you might want to slap your own on just to keep it in good nick. And this phone is also IP67 water and dust resistant. You can actually drop it in a sink, a bubbly bath or whatever, and it won't bulk up. So now let's have a shufty at the software, and it is a gloriously stock Android vibe here on the U23 Pro. Bit of Android 13 of course, as you would kind of expect. So no heavy launcher sat on top of Android. Everything looks and feels kind of similar to those Pixel phones. It is kind of bare bones though, so for instance you can change the wallpaper, but you can't set the colour of the UI based on the wallpaper colours. The home settings are literally limited to these options here. And also, don't expect much software support from HTC in the long term. You'll probably get a couple of years worth of security updates, but you won't get that guarantee of years and years of OS and security support that you will do from Google, Samsung, OnePlus, lots of big rivals. What I am enjoying here on the HTC U23 Pro is a complete lack of crapware. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, no booking.bloodycom, none of that bollocks. HTC has only chucked on a few of its own Vive apps. Speaking of which, this blower does support HTC's Vive XR Elite virtual goggly jobbies, which a big rival to the Meta Quest Pro. I did bang on about them in a video a few months back, so I won't repeat myself here. Go check that out if you want to know more. Now to unlock the U23 Pro, you've got an edge-mounted fingerprint sensor, which so far seems quite responsive and reliable. And if your fingers are a bit mucky or whatever, you do have a face unlock option, which is behaving itself right now, but if the lighting isn't exactly particularly great, then you will certainly struggle with this. And HTC has been pretty freaking generous when it comes to the storage, 256 gigs stuffed on this thing. And not only that, but if you jab a pin in its bottom and pull out that SIM tray, you'll see you've got space for a pair of SIMs, otherwise that second SIM slot can be used to stick in a micro SD memory card, just in case 256 gigs ain't enough. So now let's have a squint at that almighty 6.7 inch display, and like most rivals at this mid-range price, it is a bit of OLED tech, so you can expect nice vibrant vivid colours when you're kicking back with some animated fare for instance. Blacks are actually black, not just very dark grey. You've got nice clean whites as well. But sadly, no HDR streaming capabilities reported by Netflix, so it doesn't look like there's any HDR10 or Dolby Vision support. Still, it's a suitably eye-pleasing experience when you are kicking back with some Netflix, some YouTube, Disney+, whatever you fancy. Full HD+ resolution keeps those visuals nice and crisp. And this screen is certainly proper bright as well, so when you are using it outdoors, you won't have to squint too much to see what's going on. And you've got support for 120Hz refresh, which is actually enabled by default. As you can see there, not LTPO tech, it only steps between 120, 90 and 60Hz. And you've also got yourself a rather respectable stereo speaker setup. Let's check it out. The Pixel 7 pair are still two of my favourite flagships right now, even if they're not exactly the beefiest blowers in town. So I'm already gasping for a bit of Pixel 8 action to see exactly how Google is going to pimp this already pretty pimped out pocket pleaser. So yes, it is that bottom speaker that is spaffing out most of the audio, fairly standard at this sort of level. And the audio is quite tinny when you do boost that volume all the way up, but it's also proper loud as well, so no issues if your environment is a little bit on the noisy side. And then as well as that Bluetooth 5.2 streaming support, you do have that headphone jack, so it's great to have that wired option. And the wireless streaming seems absolutely fine as well, to be fair. Don't expect any customization here though, no equalizer action, there's no Dolby Atmos support or anything, it is fairly bare bones. Now, performance is provided by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 7 Gen 1 chipset, as also recently stuffed inside of Motorola's fresh new Razr 40 and the Xiaomi 13 Lite. It is kind of a shame that HTC didn't go with a fresher, more powerful chipset like the Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 that was packed inside of that Poco F5 that I reviewed recently. But you do at least get 12 gigs of RAM to keep things moving along smoothly. And I found that the U23 Pro happily handled a good bit of gaming, including Genshin Impact on the higher detail settings. That frame rate admittedly wasn't always quite as smooth and stable as I would have liked, but overall it coped pretty bloody well. Even when I was having 7 bells smacked out of me from every possible direction by about a dozen different gribblies, this HTC blower didn't soil itself. And this phone didn't heat up too badly either, despite the fact I was gaming for a good wee while. However, don't expect any dedicated gaming tools or menus or anything, this is once again a pretty bare bones experience. Battery, and you've got a 4600 mAh capacity cell crammed inside of that placky frame. So far the battery drain seems pretty consistent, you should hopefully get a full 5 or 6 hours of screen on time before this thing dies, helped along by the fact that it's a pretty energy efficient platform. Got no heavy clunky launchers sat on there just sapping the power. And when you do need to juice it back up again, the U23 Pro does support 30 watt wired charging, not the nippiest around but comparable to those Pixels. And something we're starting to see more from mid-range mobiles, you've also got wireless charging support on here as well at 15 watts. It's good to have that flexibility, especially if you've got smartwatches and wireless earbuds and all kinds of crap to charge up every night. You spend like half an hour just bunging cables into stuff. And last up is the camera tech, and the HTC U23 Pro rocks a 108 megapixel primary shooter with optical image stabilization. And on top of that, you've also got an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle shooter, a 5 megapixel macro snapper, and a basic 2 megapixel depth sensor. As you can see, a bit of an action packed app here, lots of different camera modes you can piddle about with. In your regular auto mode, you get a bit of 9-in-1 pixel binning, so you do get 12 megapixel photos by default, but there is a dedicated 108 megapixel mode if you want to take some really high-res photos. Quite good if you want to crop in without losing too much detail. Got the usual portrait mode shenanigans and everything, and there is a dedicated pro mode as well if you want to mess around with the likes of the ISO levels, the white balance, get a very specific kind of shot. For these here test photos, I did stick with the auto mode, which is what most people will do, and I got quite nice natural looking snaps, quite vibrant colors when shooting a vivid subject. Though that focus did struggle at times, especially with moving subjects, you'll definitely want to keep an eye on that. Make sure you take a few photos just in case. And those tones suddenly look a lot more drab when you move into more ambient, softer light. You can also capture video at up to 4K resolution. If you tap up here, you just cycle between 1080p, 720p and that Ultra HD option. And this seems to do the job for your simple shareable home movies. Footage doesn't look bad when you chuck it up on a big TV. And the audio pickup was absolutely fine as well, even when things get a little bit breezy. And then last up around front, you do have a 32 megapixel selfie shooter. Again, nothing remarkable, but it'll do the job if you just want to slap a picture of your gurning, grinning mug up on Facebook or whatever. No 4K option with that front-facing shooter. It does top off at full HD resolution, but again, the audio pickup absolutely fine. And I would say though, if the camera is a priority for you, definitely check out Google's Pixel 7a instead. The processing smarts are insane on that thing. You can capture some really nice looking photos pretty much any time of day. So anyway, that in a tasty wee nutshell is the fresh new HTC U23 Pro, and as you can see, packs some pretty impressive features, including a headphone jack, expandable storage, stuff that you don't generally find even at this sort of price point these days. But overall, it does feel like quite a bare bones experience as far as the software goes, as much as I do love a bit of stock Android action. So So it'd be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a really wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!